On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, let's dive into the first round of my NBA draft big board. Who are my top 30 players on my big board 1.0? And who should the Thunder keep a key eye on as we head into the draft process? All of that and more coming up on today's Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your teams every day.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your teams every day. I am your host, Rylan Stiles. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. You can follow the show on Twitter at LO Thunderpod. Email the show, LOThunderpod.com. On today's show, brought to you by Built Bar. We're going to dive into my NBA Draft Big Board 1.0. Again, I'm Rylan Stiles, media member and editor-in-chief over at thundersintentions.com. Again, follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. And on today's show, again, let's dive into the big board. So we've done a few player draft profiles. The top three have been completed. Monday was Jabari Smith. Tuesday was Chet Holmgren with Mavs Draft on Twitter, Richard Stayman. And yesterday was Paolo Banchero player profile. Today, let's lay out my top 30 prospects in all of the land for this first round of the NBA draft. And then next Friday, we'll do the bottom 30 and continue on my big board there if you guys want to hear it. So again, if you want to hear my second round big board, 31 through 60, and then if you want to hear past 60, I have a few guys past 60, but if you want to hear that, you can let me know in the comment section below. Or if this format of a big board on a podcast doesn't work for you, that's fine too. Let me know and we can change it up a little bit on the next episode. So let me know in the comment section below on YouTube, subscribe, like, all that fun stuff, and also anywhere else you get your podcast from. The email address, of course, if you don't have social media or if you're not on YouTube, lothunderpod@gmail.com. So let's get into my big board. My number one prospect is Jabari Smith Jr., power forward out of Auburn. You heard me rave about him on Monday. 17 points per game, 7 rebounds per game, a block per game, and then shot 43% from three. Richard Stayman says that he, has Klay Thompson-like potential as a 3-and-D candidate. Look, that's a very, very good thing for the Thunder. I mean, you give this Thunder team who already has two creators, with SGA creating for himself and off of that creates for others, and Josh Giddey setting up others as a playmaker. You give them a player that can thrive off ball and can be a knockdown shooter for the drive and kick from Shea and for just the excellent passes from Josh Giddey. That seems like a very good recipe for success. 6'10", 210 from Auburn. I really like Jabari Smith. Number two, Paolo Banchero from Duke. Again, yesterday was his profile. 17 points per game, 7 rebounds per game, 3 assists per game, and then did not shoot great from three, 32% from three. However, there is still optimism around his jump shot and how it can develop, in my opinion, to get closer to where you want it to be, in that plus 35% range. And then number three, Chet Holmgren out of Gonzaga. I don't really begrudge anyone for any combination of these three players. I think that these three players are separated by the smallest degree. And so if you have Chet and Jabari number three, or however you want to flip-flop this combination, this order, I don't blame you a bit. I think that is realistic and that is reasonable. This is not a case like last year where you can only have Cade Cunningham number one. You can have any of these three guys number one. Now, if your number one's not one of these three guys, that's where I start to get, that's where it starts to get puzzling. But if it's one of these three guys, I don't really blame you at all. And, like Richard Stayman, Mavs Draft on Twitter, doesn't even have Chet in his top three, as Chet number four in his big board. So, but one of these three guys should be number one. And in my opinion, these three guys should be in your top three in some order. As recently as 2 weeks ago, Chet was my number two and Paolo was my number three. But I moved it, and I kind of like where I have it right now of Jabari, Paolo, and Chet at 1, 2, 3. Now, my number four player is Shaedon Sharpe I think that this could look better and better as we go along the draft process, or worse and worse, right? I think that this is either going to be his actual finishing spot, or he has a bad pre-draft process and it's not even close to 4. So I think it's going to be one or the other. I think that if with a good and strong pre-draft process in terms of measurables at the combine, in terms of private workouts and interview process with teams, I think that all of that can trend to him moving up and up draft boards. He has the highest potential in this class, one of the highest ceilings in this class. He has he's a great shooter. I think that he has great athleticism. He has scary defensive potential, with his ability to be versatile if they can unlock his engagement on the defensive end. Plus, I think he has the highest upside of this draft, so I do not think that there's a better option past the top 3 if you can't get one of those top 3 guys. Now let's continue on with this NBA draft big board and talk right now about Jaden Ivey, who many of you will have number 4. Jaden Ivey, card out of Purdue, 17 points per game, 30 assists per game, 37% from 3, and then shot 73% from the line, which shows good on his shooting touch. As a player, I really like Jaden Ivey as just a basketball player. For the Thunder, I'm less in love with his fit, right? And I think that this is one of the rare cases where you do take fit into account so early on if you're the Thunder in this rebuild, because you are having to work out a routine and a scheme and a style with 2 kind of ball dominant players in Giddey and SGA. You don't really want to throw a third ball dominant guy. Jabari can play off ball, Paulo can play off ball, Chet can play off ball through the post. And then Shaedon Sharpe is a wing that, you can get involved off of your 2 guards. For Jaden Ivey, I think that his best outcome as an NBA player is with the ball in his hands. And then that would make 3 guys on this team whose best outcome in the NBA is with the ball in their hands. And that's where you start to get, it starts to get a little complicated at that point. So that's why I don't have him in my top 4. And that's why I could realistically see AJ Griffin flying up this board whenever we do this again after the combine and after we get some more info from scouts and from agents and from teams about how they're feeling about these players. Because AJ Griffin, the more you watch him, the injury concern is really the only thing holding him back. I mean, he has injury concerns about his knee and about his ankle, but 10 points per game as a bucket getter, 48% from 3, offensive playmaker for AJ Griffin. If you were looking at his game, if you could not lean on the crutch of injuries, you'd have to elevate him higher on most people's big boards. But that crutch of injuries is going to take him down to, where I have him at 6 or 8, 9, 10 on people's boards. So if we get to the combine and if we get past the combine and teams have their, doctors, their own team doctors evaluate all these prospects. If you didn't know, they're going to go through all the medicals with each and every team. And if agents share the medical history of AJ Griffin, which some of them don't share their medical history, and then that'd be a big red flag for a guy like AJ Griffin who has medical issues in his past. But if they share the medicals with the teams and feel comfortable with the teams looking at them with their own doctors, and there's an all clear feeling about AJ Griffin, then he can certainly leap up above a guy like Jaden Ivey and even a guy like Shaedon Sharpe, of course, who is a bit of a risk. But me personally, I think I have Shaedon Sharpe at 4 the entire way. The rest of the way here, and that we know he's in the draft, I can't see a world where I move Sharpe from 4. I think that the next spot available on my big board would be 5 for any of these guys who could possibly climb as we get to the combine and get through the combine. But AJ Griffin, really good player. Number 8, Keegan Murray. 22 years old as a rookie is not going to be great. I don't know how he finishes well in the paint at the NBA level. He's a really good shot maker in the mid-range and at the 3-point line. Shot 38% from 3, but a lot of those were just tough buckets from beyond the arc and still was pretty efficient when doing so, obviously, at 38%. 23 points, 2 blocks per game, 8 rebounds per game. Nice consolation prize, but I don't think that you should just kind of go out of your way to get Keegan Murray. I think he's a good player, but again, there are some limitations to where I'm not sure the upside is there. Bennedict Mathurin is number 8 for me, I should say, and Murray's number 7. And then number 9, Jalen Duren for me out of Memphis. 6'10", big. I don't really see him ever becoming a shooter or a stretch of the floor kind of guy. Nice interior scorer. Could be a lob threat for Josh Giddey. 2 blocks per game in college. 11-7 kind of guy on the offensive end. I like Jalen Duren, but I'm not in love with Jalen Duren. I've seen some people like crazily have him at like 4, like draft him at 4 for the Thunder. I don't see that with him, but I wouldn't mind him at 12 or anywhere past that. I think that Duren is a nice player, but we'll have to see how he measures out at the combine, and if he partakes in those shooting exercises in the combine to see if he have any hope to become a shooter in the NBA. We'll see. So that's where I have Duren, and then running out the top 10 is Johnny Davis, guard out of Wisconsin. Tough bucket getter, 20 points per game. Shot 33% from 3, but 78% at the line, which should show you that he has room to improve his 3-point percentage and can get that up there. I don't really know, though. What hurts me with Johnny Davis is his defensive lulls and defense and lack of defense in college is a product to me of his lack of athleticism. It's not a product of a lack of trying or lack of effort, and that's where I start to get confused. But let's dive in now to our good friends over at Built Bar. Built Bar is a fantastic protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar. Built Bar is fantastic, folks. They're amazing. They're healthy. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, 17 grams of protein. Built Bars have everything you need. It's a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar with 100% real chocolate on the outside. Folks, they're great pre-workout or post-workout or even as a meal replacement or a snack. You can use them pre-workout or post-workout again. And to me, what makes Built Bar so good is the fact that they're a healthy option for you, but they make taking the healthy option and they make it doable, because oftentimes when you try to eat healthier and you try to do the healthy thing, you're sacrificing, right? You're sacrificing and having to do the same flavors, the same things over and over again and get repetitive and tired of it, and then you quit doing it. With Built Bar, they have so many great flavors that it is easy not to feel like you're in a just repetitive cycle, and it's easy to switch it up because they have so many flavors like cookies and cream and almond and peanut butter and double chocolate and just everything you can ask for over there at Built Bar with new flavors all the time. So go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your next order. We are back on the Locked On Thunder Podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I am your host, Rylan Stiles. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. A little under the weather today, but we're paddling through it here to get you your podcast every single day. Let's dive in now to the rest of my big board. We are our top 10, which if you want to go back over it, it's Jabari Smith, Paolo Banchero, Chet Holmgren, Shaden Sharp, Jaden Ivey, AJ Griffin, Keegan Murray, Benedict Mathurin, Jalen Duren, Johnny Davis, and then now at number 11, Dyson Daniel. Dyson Daniel, G League Ignite guard. I think that he can be a defensive star in the NBA at 6'6". I think that he can be someone who kind of locks down the opposition. Shot 25% from 3, not great. You'd have to really believe that he can improve that at the NBA level. Cannot really create for himself, in terms of create his own shot, but he does a good job of setting up others. Again, a weird fit it would be for the Thunder, especially having Dort, Giddey, and Shea already. But whenever you get down to this portion of the board, there's not very many better prospects than him. Mark Williams, a center out of Duke, is my next prospect, 7-footer with 2 blocks per game, 11 points per game, 7 rebounds per game. Went over 13 from 3, has a 7'7" wingspan. He's a great inside scorer to me and a great rebounder. For me, if somehow Jalen Duren did fly up these boards and people loved him, at number 6 or 7 or whatever, I wouldn't be terribly upset if I was the Thunder. I wouldn't go try to trade up for Jalen Duren. I'd just settle for Mark Williams if that's kind of where the board lies at 12 or 11. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't really put all my eggs in the Jalen Duren basket when we have a guy like Mark Williams here. That's just how I personally believe. I know a lot of you love Jalen Duren, and we'll see how that evolves throughout this draft process. But as of right now, there's not a ton separating those two prospects. In fact, there's only 2 players, Johnny Davis and Dyson Daniel. Akai Agbaji right here at 13, the guard/forward out of Kansas, 22 years old. To me, he's the safest pick in the draft. And so if you're looking at this from a draft perspective, which I am right now, that's why I have him so high. If you're looking at this from a Thunder perspective, I'd be interested to see how the Thunder value him. He's a safe pick in the draft, which is typically not what you want at this stage at 22 years old. But to me, he has no bust potential. And eventually for the Thunder, you just need to get guys who won't bust out of the league and who you feel comfortable you can actually tangibly put around Shea and Josh Giddey and these other players that you have. So 43%, 41% from three is awesome. I think he'll be a solid NBA contributor at worst, and at best, he can be a plus defender in the NBA that can keep your offense in a rhythm, in a flow, and help you score the basketball, which is good while being an above average defender. And I think at 6'5", if you can get him the development that he needs defensively, he can be a true modern NBA defender, which will be great for his long-term progression. But I don't see a world in which Ochai Agbaji is not in the NBA in 3 years, and there's other guys on this list who could theoretically have that happen to them. I just don't see a way where Agbaji busts, so I'm going to keep him right here at number 13. Number 14, Jaden Hardy, the guard of the G League Ignite program. I personally really like Hardy. I think that Hardy can do wonders at the combine for himself and can really help his stock out. But he is going to be 20 years old, 17 points per game, 26% from three, 1 steal per game. He's a really great ball handler. He can create for others. Is really good in the pick and roll as a pick and roll ball handler, but awful defensively. And I'm just not sure his scoring potential is there. And at that point, you would have Josh Giddey, who's not a score first guy, who's a more of a facilitator kind of guy. Jaden Hardy, who's not a score first guy, more facilitating type of guy. SGA, who is a score first guy and a facilitator kind of guy. It would really depend on Hardy of who you pair him with in terms of his fit with the Thunder. Who do you pair him with at the top, with your first selection versus getting him, lower at like 12 or something, which is what would be the Thunder's range to get Hardy. But again, this big board is for the entire draft, not just the Thunder, but I am putting it back on the Thunder perspective. My next prospect here is the forward out of Baylor, Jeremy Sochan. I think he's the best defender in this class. Elite as a modern NBA defender. 29% from three is doable with his level of defense. Like, I think that he can guard 1 through 5 in the NBA. No problem. I think they can do that at a high degree, honestly. I think as a plus playmaking attribute for himself, he's a really good rebounder for his position. Of course, he gambles a bit defensively, and a lot of times it pays off, but sometimes it doesn't. And you live with that because of how good he is defensively. If he can improve his three-point shot even just a slight bit, he can start to come up this board a lot. For me, this is another interesting prospect, I think, is Nikola Jovic. I have him at 16. I've seen him, before the draft process really got cooking here recently after March Madness. Going back to last November, I heard whispers of, top 10 for Jovic. And so it's interesting to me to see him fall down people's boards. And some people have him, in the low 20s. I'm at 16. I think that the forward out of Serbia, at 6'10", it goes back to upside. I think that he has elite playmaking aspects for his size. I think he's a really good shot creator for his size. I think he can do both ends of a pick and roll. He can be the roll man or the pop man. He can also be the pick and roll ball handler. Really versatile defender, especially if you get him within an NBA developmental program like the Thunder have. And so that's why I feel very comfortable taking Jovic if I was the Thunder and just banking on him to pan out as a prospect. I think that he's really good. Kendall Brown, my next prospect out of Baylor, 6'8", 19 years old, 10 points per game, 4 rebounds per game, 2 assists per game, 38% from three. I think he's a prototypical NBA player in this modern day and age, and you're going to want to get your hands on a Kendall Brown at this point in the draft whenever most teams down here are trying for the play-in or trying to kind of just put the finishing touches on the rebuild. This is a guy who can be in your playoff rotation immediately, and I think that that's great. Him, Jeremy Sochan, these guys can really be in your playoff rotation tomorrow. So I really think that that's just a great outcome for the NBA. I have number 18, Patrick Baldwin Jr., one of my favorite prospects in this draft. I think that if he had the Shaden Sharp treatment right, if he just did not play a single game in college, he'd be a top 10 pick. He had the injuries. The issue here is that this ankle injury has lingered with him through college. He played at Milwaukee to play for his dad, and it is difficult to play for your father at any stage, but I don't want to blame that on his dad for why he had a bad season. I think it's more so the injuries and the environment of college, right? I talk all the time about how in the college game, the spacing is different. It's much worse. Your teammates around you are much worse than it's going to be in the NBA. And whenever you go to an environment like that in general, which is any college program, then you go to a program in Milwaukee that does not have draftable talent on their team next to you, it's going to look even worse while dealing with an injury, especially. I think that he has massive upside, and to me, he should stay in the draft. I know he's entered the transfer portal in case he doesn't get the right testing scores that he wants from the NBA. But Patrick Baldwin Jr., while he might slip lower than he should have had he not played a single game in Milwaukee, I think that he'll still be very, very good in the NBA. And I would love the Thunder to get him and hopefully they can promise him that they'll pick him at 30, and that's what will make him stay in the draft. I personally believe that if he gets a promise from somebody in the first round, he'll stay, and no matter where that promise lies. So if the Thunder promise him at pick 30, and then if he goes before 30, oh well. And if he is there at 30, you draft him at 30. I would love that strategy for the Thunder. Number 20, I should say number 19, I have Kennedy Chandler, guard out of Tennessee. Undersized, but really scrappy. He can play a really strong defense in a vacuum. Of course, just looking at his defense at 6 foot tall, he's going to have limitations just based on his height. But you take away those limitations on his height, and he plays a really technically sound defense while being able to be pesky and to get inside of your shorts on defense. To me, the comparison here, if you love NBA comps, would be Dennis Schroeder with defense, and that is a really good comp for a backup point guard. And sure, he could be a starting point guard on a bad team early in his career, but in general, right, as you start to evolve his career and whatever team he lands on starts to get better and better and better, I think he can be a sixth-man type, a backup point guard type that can close games for you because of his defense. Even at 6 feet tall, he can't stay on the floor defensively, in my opinion, in the NBA. Ty Washington, guard out of Kentucky. Here's another one. He's at 20, and then we're going to do my 21 through 30 after the break. But at 20, Ty Washington, him and Chandler to me are interchangeable of who you have above the other, but they're both in the same range for me. 6'3", he's a plus playmaker. He loves the three-point shot, loves upside from beyond the arc. I think that he has limitations, and despite his height, has way more defensive limitations than Chandler does, and that's why I have Chandler higher. He lacks that lateral quickness to me. Ty Washington does. So I have him a step lower than Chandler, but either one would be a good fit, in my opinion, for teams and for the teams in this specific range, in my opinion. But let's continue on here with number 20. That was 20, Ty Washington, 21, coming up after the break. But first, I want to say right now, but our good friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline, folks, is incredible. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of betting stats and sports information from all the latest sports developments and everything you can ever need from league reviews and news, including this year's basketball playoffs, the start of the MLB season. BetOnline is your continued source for all things sports wagering information from live betting, playoffs, esports, and more. Head over to the website today or even use your mobile device and learn more about the trends and actions this season. BetOnline is where the game starts. BetOnline, folks, it's so easy to go to your URL. Type in BetOnline.net, go to Sportsbook, and then we're going to go down to basketball, NBA, and we have Grizzlies, Timberwolves tonight. I've got Timberwolves plus 1.5 to extend this series as home dogs. Let me know who you have on Twitter at Ryland_Styles. And again, go to betonline.net. We are back on the Locked On Thunder Podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you for making Locked On Thunder your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you, talking Thunder basketball. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NBA podcast. From jump ball, the play-in tournament, through the NBA Finals. Our local experts are taking you deeper inside the playoffs than ever before, with, of course, off-season reviews and off-season previews for every other team in the NBA. So stay tuned for that. It's a 5-day-week show, just like we are over there for the national perspective on the NBA. Let's finish out the big board, taking you all the way down to 30. I have Ousmane Dieng at number 21, Terry Eason at number 22, Blake Wesley at number 23, EJ Liddell at number 24, and then I have Mekhi Branham at number 25, Wendell Moore Jr. at number 26, and to me, Wendell Moore Jr. is another interesting big for the Thunder who, a forward, I should say, for the Thunder who can use a forward and a wing at 6'5". I love his ball handling ability. I love his ability to finish at the rim, which the Thunder lack, having guys that to finish at the rim besides SGA, who's a lead at it. Everyone else struggles. Lou Dort struggles. Josh Giddey struggles. Really, SGA is the only elite player at the rim on the perimeter for the Thunder, and I love what Wendell Moore can bring you at the rim. I think he's nice as a relocator and cutter off ball offensively, and a very, very, very switchable defender, which you have to have in the NBA. Now, here's one that I find very interesting is Christian Braun at number 27. Look, as a Kansas fan, I've watched Chris Braun shoot 44% from three as a rookie. As a freshman, I should say, in the college terms, down to 38% as a as a sophomore, or I should say down to like 30, what was it, 5% as a sophomore, and then back up to 38. So you kind of see him take the peaks and valleys of the 3-point shot in college. I don't really love him as a ball handler. He's a fine passer in terms of whipping the ball around the offense and keeping you in line and in a rhythm and just kind of being a swing passer. He's not a great passer in terms of setting anybody up. I think that teams at this range will fall in love with the chance that he can be a sniper and be somebody you can put in at 6'7" to not be a defensive liability while also having huge upside as a shooter from beyond the arc. And that's kind of what his limitations are and what his kind of ceiling is at the NBA level. 28, I have Christian Koloko, the center out of Arizona. I like his game a lot. Elite low post defender. I think he can switch onto the perimeter without getting exposed too heavily. Obviously, I wouldn't love him guarding threes all the time, but I think that he can guard threes at a reasonable clip and not just be play off the floor, and then guards fours and fives very, very well. Despite his age, I still think he'd be not a project per se at 22 years old, but somebody who needs time to develop. He didn't really take basketball seriously until like 15 years old. So he's still pretty raw in terms of just his basketball age and not his actual age. So I like Koloko a lot, and I would not mind taking him at, pick 30 for the Thunder. And if he's there, if you don't get a center in your first two picks. Number 29, I have Hugo Beason for the guard from New Zealand, 6'3", 18 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, 3 assists per game. I like his upside a lot. And then number 30, the draft really dips off for me, and I'll explain this later on in the process. But number 30, I do have Marjan Beauchamp from the G League Ignite program, but I'm not in love with him. To me, I said it to Mavs draft in one of our text exchanges. To me, whenever I look at Marjan Beauchamp, I just see a great value Darius Bazley. Not as great defensively, same or worse offensively. Not a great combination for me. And I think that, for the Thunder specifically, you already have Beauchamp at home, and it's a better version of it in Darius Bazley. So that's where I have number 30. If you want to hear the rest of my big board, you can feel free to let me know in the comment section below. I'm not sure how this format goes over on podcast, but to me, after about Dieng, I start to worry about the draft itself. Of course, you can sneak in Eason as well, but really the Blake Wesley, EJ Liddell, Brenningham, Moore, Braun, Koloko, Beason, Beauchamp, I'm not really in love with them. They're technically first round grades, quote unquote, because they're having to fill the slots that fill out the top 30, but my first round grades really stop at Eason, and then past that, I don't love them anymore. I don't love the draft anymore, to where I could see them falling in the second round in terms of just pure talent. But somebody has to get picked from picks 23 down to 30. So that's where I'm at on this draft class specifically. What are your thoughts on the draft class for you? Let me know in the comment section below or on Twitter at Ryland_Styles. Also, you can follow me on Twitter over there and subscribe, like the show on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcast from. So until Monday, whenever I'll be feeling better and more like myself on Monday, subscribe for free, and we'll see you Monday. Until then, be good and be good to one another.